Very good. All right. In his 54 years in this country, Nick Ullett has done everything. From 7 Ed Sullivan shows, to being a commentator on All Things Considered, to creating the role of Gerald, the ultimate British twit, in Me and My Girl on Broadway, to his present gig in Rogue Machine's El Nino. It's a start. Ladies and gentlemen, Nick Ullett.
All right, it's 1963, and to the pride and delight of my parents, I graduate from Cambridge University. A couple of months later, to the horror of my parents, I announce that I'm going to become half of a comedy team with a guy that I know from college, Tony, and that we're going to go and work in London, which we do. My father throws me out of the house, forbids me to ever come back because I'm throwing my life away, and Tony and I start working in London, and after a few months, we're working in a small club off Berkeley Square called the Blue Angel, and it's in Mayfair, and one night our lives are changed forever by the arrival of an American comedian. His name was Jackie Mason. And in 1963, Jackie Mason was huge in America, and he had been brought over to London to headline a really big supper club called the Talk of the Town, and he was having a terrible time, dying nightly. For a start, as far as a British audience went, his sort of New York Jewish accent was impenetrable. And secondly, as the son of a rabbi and an ex-rabbi himself, his very sense of humor depended on a sort of twisted sense of Talmudic logic that was somewhat lost on drunken British Protestants. So he came down to this little club where we were working to try out some material, you know. But Jackie would have these catchphrases. You know what I'm talking about? Hey, you know what I'm talking about? And of course, the English, who are not known for their politeness as audiences, were going, no idea. Do you know what he's talking about? Not a clue. And Jackie would go, when you go to the movies, do you talk to the screen? What on earth is he talking about? And then we went on and we got laughs because obviously we spoke the language. So he was duly impressed, and he brought his manager down to see us, a guy called Bob. And Bob sat through our act, apparently liked it, smiled a lot, because at the end of it, he looked at us and he said, "You guys have a great future in America." And he left. But we were encouraged. The Beatles had just been in America. They'd been on something called the Ed Sullivan Show. Apparently, Anglophilia was sweeping the United States. We had not the vaguest idea what Anglophilia was. In fact, I think in our ignorance, we thought it had something to do with having sex with dead British people. And with jokes like that, couldn't we be the Beatles of comedy? So we got on a boat and we went to America, the USS United States. Took us 5 days. We arrived in New York. We checked into a hotel called the Wyndham Hotel. We called Bob. And Bob said, and this is where it gets a little weird, he said, "Okay, boys, I want my partner to see the act. We'll be right over." So a sort of panic sets in because between the two of us, we have $211 and no return ticket. And we thought that he had some, we would arrive and he'd sort of put us to work. And instead, apparently, we are auditioning to some guy we've never seen in a hotel room the size of a closet. And so these guys arrive, and Bob was this sort of big, sandy-haired teddy bear guy, real friendly. Erwin, his partner, was short, dark, wore a dark blue suit, black tie, never smiled, had a 5 o'clock shadow slammed into his cheeks. Perfect for comedy. And so Bob says, "All right, boys, let's get this show on the road." So we push aside the 2 single beds, the guys sit down, and we start our act, which at that point in time started with this little ditty, which God only knows we thought was hysterical. The whole world looks all right to me, God's in heaven above. It's plain for everyone to see, we're in brotherly love. Oh, brotherly love, we're in brotherly love. We're in perfect harmony, we're in brotherly love. My baby came to tea today, I gave her buttered toast, and as she left I heard her say, you were a heavenly host. Oh, heavenly host, you were a heavenly host. I dig your buttered toast the most, you were a heavenly host. I'm singing this to 2 Jews in a hotel room in New York. Some people say that 3's a crowd, the church does not agree. 3 in 1 and 1 in 3, God, my baby and me. Oh, baby and me, God, my baby and me. This time 3 is company, God, my baby and me. In the room, silence. Nothing. Oh, shit. We stumble on, and after about 10 minutes, Owen leans over to Bob, and he goes, and Bob goes, just a moment, boys, and the 2 of them leave the room. And only Bob comes back. Great. We haven't been in the country for less than, 6 hours. We've already lost half our audience. And and we are panicked, and we just keep going to nothing. Bob just sits there staring at the pattern in the hotel carpet, and the sweat is dripping off our bodies, and it's terrifying. And we end, and there's nothing. All the air has been sucked out of the room, and eventually Bob looks up, and he looks up and he goes, in London it seems so funny. Well, not to worry. We'll see what happens to you tomorrow night at the bitter end. And he leaves. And we are just fucking devastated. I mean, it looks like this whole adventure is over before it's begun. And the next day, we are desperate. We're crazed, and we get ourselves down to the bitter end, and we get there really early, way too early. And our instructions are to go to the bitter end and not to go on, that we will be put on when Bob arrives. Bob apparently is collecting a number of agents who he's going to bring down to see us. Now, this is 1964 in Greenwich Village, bitter ends on Bleecker Street. At that point in time, every young performer in Greenwich Village wanted to be either Bob Dylan or Joan Baez. So, from 6:30 until 10:30, we sit through 4 hours of single folk singers. An endless parade of white middle-class kids singing about the pain of being black. Then Bob arrives with the cluster of guys in raincoats and dark blue suits. They sit down, we're sent on stage, and actually after 4 hours of rural poverty, brotherly love is pretty funny. And the audience starts laughing it up, and then they really get into the act, and they're laughing, and we finish, do our, 12 minutes, huge applause, and out of this, we get an agent. We get our first booking in a place right across the road called the Cafe Au Go-Go. It really was the 60s. And for the next few months, we played jazz clubs and coffee houses in and around New York. And we're doing all right, but we're not really making any money. And then Bob calls us into the office and he said, I got a real money gig for you. You're going down to Dallas, Texas. You're going to headline a supper club. Okay, so we fly to Texas. This is May of 1964, a scant 6 months after the assassination of John F. Kennedy. At this point, Dallas is a dry town. If you want to drink booze in the club, you have to bring your own booze in a brown paper bag, right? There is another law on the books in Dallas that says if you are carrying a concealed weapon, it must be displayed in a public place. So we, on our opening night, you're getting there before me, I know. On our opening night, we walk out on stage and we're facing this sea of huge people sitting at tables, and on the tables are brown paper bags and guns, which I immediately assume is a way of them instantly reviewing our act. Come on, these people had just knocked off a president. They weren't going to lose any sleep over a couple of British comics. But actually, it didn't matter at all because they were totally uninterested in anything we did. It was like we barely existed. And after a few extremely quiet nights, the owner of the place calls us into his office and he says, "Listen, boys, I know there must be an audience that really likes you and thinks you're funny, but it ain't mine. So I'm going to have to let you go. I'll pay you all right, but I've got another comic coming in next week, so you can just play through the weekend." And we leave, you know. And this is really big time, because this is the end of our American dream. Kaput, it's gone. I mean, we're not just in shit, we're done. If the only place that we can play are a few coffee houses and jazz places in New York City, we don't have a career in America. We are really screwed. So we take a bottle of whiskey and go up to our room and start to drink heavily. And I'm almost in tears. And we're trying to rack our brains. How can we save this? Is there any, you know? And eventually, in sort of desperation, I go, "What is it? What do they want? What do they want from us?" And my partner looks at me and he says, "That's it. It's 1964. And I go, "I know what the fucking year is. It's what? What do you mean that's it?" He said, "What does Dallas expect from two Brits in 1964? And I go, "Well, they probably want us to sing Beatles songs." He says, "Yes." I said, "We're going to sing Beatles songs?" He says, "Yes." He says, "What else is it that they think they know about the Brits?" And I go, "We're all gay?" He says, "Yes." "We'll sing Beatles songs and tell homosexual jokes." So that night, we go down and we walk out on stage and we announce that we are going to begin our act by singing an English madrigal. And already you can see people starting to sort of nod off and go, "Oh, fuck." And my partner, who had a wonderful sort of countertenor voice, went, "Well, nonny, 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 well. She was just 17, you know what I mean, and the way she looked," and away we went, and they went fucking nuts. They're whooping and throwing their big hats in the air and stomping their feet, and they love it. And we go right from that. I say, "Listen, I don't know if you know this, but there was a British highwayman called Dick Turpin who came over to America in the 1880s, and he was a very successful stagecoach robber. In fact, he is known, it is recorded that he robbed a stagecoach outside Austin, Texas. And he stopped these people and the stagecoach and the horses reared up. And he said, 'All right, chaps, I'm going to rob all the women and rape all the men.'" One of the guys in the stagecoach went, "Wait a minute, you're that Mr. Turpin guy?" "Yes, that's right, that's me." He said, "Well, Mr. Turpin, don't you mean you're going to rob all the men and rape all the women?" And a little voice came from inside the stagecoach, and it went, "You let Mr. Turpin rob the coach the way he wants to." All right, I apologize, but they fucking loved us. We were so successful that the guy had to keep us on with the other comic. There were literally people coming back to see us. One guy, I heard this guy say, somebody said, "You're coming back again?" And the guy said, "I want to see those little old limey butt boys again." Well, thank you very much, sir. And the only thing that came out of this was that we actually got around, during this period of brown-nosing and pandering to this dreadful audience, we wrote a piece of material that at last we felt sort of connected who we were with an American audience. And what it was a tribute to the greatest writer in the English language. It was a tribute to William Shakespeare.
Thank you. While we're on the subject of money and England, we would like to pay a musical tribute now to two of our most important and lucrative exports to this country. One is the work of William Shakespeare. The other, as this is musical, I'm sure you'll recognize.
To be or not to be, that is the question.
Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of a courageous fortune, or to take on the sea of troubles by opposing in them, to die asleep, no more by asleep, to say we had the heartache and 1,000 natural shocks, the flesh is there too. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished to die. Sleep, sleep, on the chance to dream. There's the rub.
There's the rub. And it was that piece of material that got us our first Ed Sullivan show. And so, out of this pot of shit, we spun gold. Thank you.